keynote of the day is the amazing Steve Hooker. He is an Olympic gold medalist, and he's going to be interviewed by Ash, founder of Fireside and Gout. Welcome them up, please.
We're sharing a couch. Let's do it. Hi everyone, I'm Steve, and you are true endurance athletes if you're all here. I did an event in my sporting day that took me about 4 seconds, and you guys have been at this for 3 days, so absolutely well done to all of you for still being here.
Hell yeah, go team. Awesome. So for some of the guys here, I suppose you may or may not know about Steve and his story. Why don't you give us a bit of the TLDR?
I've always had like two passions in my life. I've always loved sport. I grew up in a sporting household. My mum was an Olympic long jumper, so I was always sort of surrounded by that, and was lucky enough to represent Australia at the highest level. I went to 3 Olympic Games, won a gold medal in Beijing in 2008 in the pole vault. But my other passion has been property and housing, and so whilst I was building up to that Olympic moment, I was studying property in Melbourne, working for Stockland, one of Australia's leading property developers. And so I had these two parallel careers running alongside each other. Was lucky enough to be a full-time athlete for 5 years in the middle of that. It was a wonderful experience. And then, got back into housing, and now I run my own housing consultancy, development management firm, trying to deliver impact housing and play my part in solving this housing crisis that we're all in.
That's cool. I think maybe just touch on there, not only did you win a gold medal in 2008, it was the first Aussie track and field athlete to win a gold medal in 60?
Bloke.
Aussie bloke. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So I think I'm going to get real specific. The first male field event gold medal in 60 years. So we won a high jump gold medal in 1948. That guy went to the Olympics on a boat, so that was a long time ago. And then my dad's training partner, actually, Ralph DeBell, he was the last male before me. He won the 800-metre gold medal in 1968. And then we had a lot of sensational women that won gold medals, including Kathy Freeman in Sydney in 2000. And then I was the next, and we've had some pretty good athletes since then. We've got great pole vaulters now. Nicola Kennedy obviously won a gold medal in Paris. Hope you all watched that. I had the pleasure of calling it on the 9 coverage.
That's awesome, mate. And so, look, we caught up this morning and had a matcha and a long black and a protein smoothie, and then talked smack for 90 minutes, and we're like, we should have just recorded that. But what I found interesting, I didn't know a lot about yourself and your story, other than the gold medal, but I think a lot of people get some value from what you're doing now in business. I know you said, social housing and trying to make affordable housing, but I think what's really awesome is your entrepreneurial journey to get to this point. And I want to touch on those, there's 4 pillars, I suppose, or 4 different segments in the market where you're trying to solve problems. And what I find fascinating is you've approached each one of these as there's a problem there. I have no freaking idea what the solution is. No one else has a solution, so let's go figure it out. So maybe touch on.
All right, how do we get here? After retiring from my sport, after the London Olympics, I was a new dad, just finished up my sport. It took me a while to find my way back to property, if I'm honest, but through a series of entrepreneurial activities, businesses that I own some restaurants, had a sports marketing agency, ran a health tech startup for just over a year, and then found myself back into property, and spent 6 years growing and leading a business called Resimax Group in Melbourne. It went from being 20 staff to 200 staff, controlling 200 land lots in Melbourne to 20,000 land lots, and building 50 homes a year to 500 homes a year in that period of time. It was huge growth. It was me running fast with the owner and founder of that business, and it was an amazing experience. But it also meant I was running a building business, building 500 homes during COVID in Melbourne, which was real hard. In the end, rewarding, and we got through it and stronger for it, but really hard. And I went on my first holiday after that period of time and just sat down and just thought, if I was running my own business, what would it be? And that is a dangerous thought for someone who's entrepreneurial. And then all of a sudden, like 10 pages in my notebook just got filled up with the idea of what would become iHire Projects, which stands for Impact Housing Initiative. And the idea was, it was sort of the antithesis of what I'd been doing in some ways. It was a business for me and for things that I was passionate about. I wanted to care about what I was doing when I went to work. I loved my team. I loved the projects that we were working on, all that sort of stuff, but it wasn't driven from my own core values. I wanted a small team that could have big impact, and that's where this development management model comes in. It enables us to do a lot with a little. And I wanted something that would be resilient to the market as well. And so whilst it feels good to do this kind of housing, also, like I could see, and this was 4 years ago, I could see on the horizon this affordability thing was coming at us at a rate of knots. And I knew that there'd be strong government for support for it as well. And so you can do good things and have a financially resilient model if you get it right. And so I guess in my sport, pole vault was a real problem to solve. That's how I looked at it. Like, I enjoyed the puzzle and trying to unpick that puzzle, and I'm the same in business. And I fancy myself a problem solver. I knew there was a problem there. I knew the areas where I wanted to play and just said, all right, let's go and try and solve some problems, and stepped out to have a crack at it. And that was just over 3 years ago. And unlike, I'm hearing all like stories of people in this space, and they're like, I had an idea, and then I went and did a minimum viable product, and then I spun up an e-commerce website, and then I was in market. And I've been at this at 3 years, and last week I finished my first project.
You?
Yeah. So it's a long process, you know, when you're dealing with governments, planning authorities, councils, all of that sort of stuff. But we've ended up with 4 verticals where we think we've created something of value that solves specific problems. Some of it is through partnership, some of it is just through new ways of doing things. But we knew we wanted to deliver affordable housing. We wanted to make sustainable housing more affordable. We wanted to have an impact in community housing, particularly family violence. We knew that things weren't really working that well with some areas of the NDIS disability housing, and we wanted to find new solutions in that space, and we wanted to assist in Aboriginal housing. And we've got 4 products now. We've got a pillar in each of those that we're delivering upon now, and we've come up with new ways of doing things, and I'll just talk about each of them quickly. In family violence housing, we did a project for a small community housing provider in Melbourne. We came in late. They'd started a process, and to go from a block of land to 4 homes that women and their children would move out of motels to move into, it took them 3 years to get those homes designed, approved, and built. And they had funding to do 8 more homes on 2 sites. And we said, all right, well, let's design this in a way that it can be really, really fast and really repeatable. And so we bought a block of land in March of last year, and people moved into those homes last Thursday. And so we'd done that in 15 months instead of 3 years by finding some quirks in the planning scheme, designing directly with the builder so that were really fast and affordable to build, and sitting within all the planning requirements. And now that's a model that we've repeated on a second block. The next one will finish next month. So we've proved up that pilot can be repeatable and scalable. And now we're playing a very small part, and a lot of people have to play a small part in getting women fleeing family violence into homes as quickly as possible. So we hope to do a lot more of that. Our Aboriginal housing project was completely different. The thing that we've resolved there is like true First Nations consultation. And we got invited by a group called the Bull-Niniwan Group. It was an old teammate of mine, Kyle Vanderkuyp, who still remains the 110 hurdles national record holder for Australia. He'd been contacted by that group. They had a block of land. They wanted to build a house, and they just weren't sure really how to go about it. And so we said, amazing, let's just get involved and see what we can do. We ended up having a whole group of people contribute their time and materials pro bono for this project. And we ended up designing a house that was truly designed by community for community. It was also designed using modern methods of construction. So it used a panelised wall system. So that thing went from a concrete slab to lock up, which means like doors and windows and everything that you could close it up in 5 days. But that all came off 18 months of consultation. And at the end of that project, we opened that house last Wednesday. Community had a house that was truly theirs. But importantly, what we had was a model for how we could consult better, because there were bits we did well, there were bits that we did not so well. through that process, and we went back and reinterrogated that with the Wathaurong Co-op, who we did it with, and we improved upon what that process would be so that we could go and do that again. And so the cool thing, it's a great house that's come out of that, and it had some really cool building technology in it, but the best thing was the engagement process that's come out of that, so that we can start from a much higher level of understanding of how to connect and to get true feedback on housing design for those sorts of communities. We have also, the biggest project that we've been doing is trying to resolve like retail housing affordability for new housing. We did a whole heap of work on this to understand what makes housing expensive. And I posed you this question and you didn't get the answer right. But we did a lot of work and
Just
we resolved
everyone,
on...
I got it wrong.
You got it wrong, yeah. And most people do. What's the thing that makes housing expensive if you're building new housing? And there are things that make it expensive, and this is part of the driver of the problem, like construction costs, cost of labour, cost of materials, all of those sorts of things. But the number one thing that makes it expensive is actually cars. Because in Australia, we've gone from houses being this big, and now that we've got an affordability crunch, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the proportion of road, the proportion of garages compared to houses, how you've got to move garbage trucks through sites, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we had to fully flip the model on its head and say, well, how much house does a human need to live in, and how much house can a human afford? And most people on key worker wages in Australia can afford, with interest rates and construction costs the way they are now, about 80 square metres of home. And that's like 2 garages.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So we had to say, okay, well, how can we build around that as a starting point, and then reframe how a whole master plan works and how the housing works, so that we're building the houses that people can afford, and that I think respond to how we're going to deal with cars in the future anyway, which is less dependence on cars, less ownership of cars. But importantly, we need beautiful, practical places to live. We did that project in conjunction with Breathe Architecture, who is Australia's leading sustainability architecture firm. That's now a project called Featherweight Housing, which we've just launched our first project in the last week, and we've got a second project that's coming through. And again, the idea of that is it's repeatable housing models that can be built as a product, filled with landscaping, filled with green tree canopy coverage, and filled with community connection, all of the things you lose when cars become the focus of a development rather than people.
That's awesome, mate. And so, like, what does that look like if, you know, this project now proved it out? What's your goal with that in addressing the affordability crunch we have with housing now for Australians?
Well, supply is a huge issue, which is why housing is expensive. We are on the Gold Coast. I don't know if any of you are living up here right now, but there's effectively 0 vacancy rate on rentals on the Gold Coast right now. There's just not enough housing here. And any new housing that is being built here, if they're apartments, they're basically full floor luxury apartments, because they're pretty much the only thing that stacks up from a feasibility, from a delivery perspective in the apartment model. It costs like $8,000 a metre to build an apartment right now. They're so expensive. Whereas like a volume builder can build a townhouse for $2,000 to $3,000 a metre. So that's a massive delta. So whilst we've got land that's there that is approved to have housing on it, it's just really hard to make the financial stack up to deliver that housing. And so we had to find something that could get the density out of the land, that could support the land value. Otherwise, people just hold on it and sit on it forever, but deliver at a build price that works. So we're trying to get a higher density at that lower build rate, and we think we found a little niche that's sort of sitting there where we can we're able to do that in a way now that means new housing is actually deliverable, not just zoned and permit approved and all that sort of stuff, but actually be able to delivered in a commercial sense and at a size that is affordable for people that are trying to get into the market.
That's awesome. And so if we go back to that moment before, I'm sure you talk about this a bunch and think on it, like, you're doing the jump, gold medal opportunity, and that moment, that feeling, everything you have there. Can you draw parallels to anything in business where you've had that something maybe not as intense, but similar, where you're having those feelings, or you have to center yourself beforehand?
It's a good feeling. Like I feel like if there's entrepreneurs in the room, business owners, I'm sure that there are. Work life is often the opposite of sports life in a way. I think by the day, for most times, and I've got an asterisk against this, but most times, by the time you get to the win, you're kind of grateful that it just hasn't fallen over. Because in work, and in sport to an extent, you've got to bank it. You've got to believe that it's done. You've got to be then just like dealing with, well, what will make it not happen, rather than what will make it happen as much as that. And so you're overcoming the things that might stand in your way by the time you get there. And then by the time the agreement's signed, the deal's done, you've sold the thing or whatever it's going to be, you're just like, okay, I can relax because it's there. But I banked that win 6 months ago mentally because I had to be able to give me the energy to get through it. And in a way, the Olympics is like that as well. Like afterwards, you're like, okay, that's a relief. I've got 1 day in 4 years where I've got to get it right. I know that that's my opportunity, and I know 4 years is a long time, and there is the same kind of sense of relief afterwards. The thing I will say right now is that I used to be that used to be my line on how it felt doing things in business up until last week, and I think finishing projects that were really aligned to who I am and my values, and I'd driven the whole way through, that felt pretty bloody different to me. For the first time in business, I was like, that was a really, really good day.
That's awesome.
So I think I've kind of, it was a hypothesis that I had, I guess, at the start of this journey and starting up my own thing. But last week was the first time where I was like, all right, I want more of this. This is giving me, for the first time, I think, since finishing jumping, like that feeling of, all right, like this is, that you can have really great days in work, which like that competition day. Like when I was an athlete, I loved training. Like I love doing the work. I love testing myself every day, and I still love that bit about work, life, running a business just as much. But it's nice to have those moments where you can stop and say that was a pretty cool thing that we did together.
So everyone here's had like their best day ever, like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, they smashed last year's records or whatever. It's the same as winning a gold medal is what you're telling us.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. Except the problem with that is, isn't that just the start of the journey? Don't you then have to deliver upon what you've done?
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, you get that feeling. And so I think it's hearing your story, mate, and like the journey you've been on, it's fascinating to me, like how much work you would have put in for such a long period of time to be at the top of your field in athletics and then have something like completely different and go into, this entrepreneurial journey you've gone on and solving all of these problems, everything. And it's like, what can you attribute that to, whether it's your upbringing, whether it's, those 5 people in your circle that helped influence this, whether it's, certain people you look to for inspiration or motivation or whatever it might be, because that's a big shift. I'm assuming, we didn't talk about this, but I'm assuming like there's potentially a loss of identity there where you won the gold, and then I don't know what the rest of your career looked like after that, but like I'm assuming that was the peak, right? And then after that, it's like, okay, what's next? And as you said, you went off and helped scale this business, and you had that moment away on holiday where you're reflecting, writing the 10 pages of notes. But that like loss of identity, like talk to us about that. And there isn't a touch on, I think like a lot of us, whether people here who are entrepreneurs and got their own businesses, or they're leaders in the businesses they're in, or they're key person of influence, or they're looking at their career and thinking about the next move. I think a lot of us attach like our personal identity to what we're doing, to our job. And it's an easy thing to grab onto. And I know as an entrepreneur, like going through scaling businesses, building it, having all the ego-driven stuff, like we were talking around before, we're like, yeah, I had a business doing 30 mil a year and 100 employees and all this stuff. And then you lose it. It's like, oh, okay, that's like, yeah, that's a hit to that identity. Like here was Ash, who had a business called Sketch and Etch that made neon signs, and here's Ash without that. So who is Ash and what's next?
100%. So yeah, there's a massive loss of identity. And particularly for me during my sport, I wasn't in a particularly healthy environment. I think where I was doing my sport, it was very outcomes driven. I would say the young athletes now have a much more balanced approach to who they are, and I applaud that. But very much for me, I was not just me. I was me who delivered and got good results, and that's how I saw myself, and other people saw me, and was rewarded for that accordingly. And as soon as it stopped, no idea who I was. And you're just lucky. Like certain people come into your life at the right time. And I just had this, sort of chance encounter through a bit of work I'd done with Red Bull with this guy named Aki Hinsa, He's an amazing man. He's an orthopedic surgeon out of Finland. He's their sort of head doctor for the Finnish Olympic team, but he does all the high performance training for the Formula One drivers. And he'd built up this high performance philosophy well ahead of his time. It's quite common now because it's all trickled down from the Formula One teams to how a lot of people look at performance now, even within organisations. But this was, 2012, and he basically had a thing that he called the core, and it was you have to be truly aligned with yourself to be able to achieve any sort of real high performance. And for him, it was 3 questions that you could ask yourself. And it's just how honest you're willing to be with yourself when it comes to those 3 questions. And they're, who are you, what do you want, and are you in control? And you can take that wherever you want it to go, but I can tell you, I retired, had my first baby, moved back to Melbourne from living in Perth in America, and I was like low numbers out of 10 on all of those 3 things.
Wow.
And went on a journey of redefining who I was because I was lost. I didn't have a whole heap of self-esteem in this kind of new bit of life that I was in. Everyone you meet will just think about this other person that you were, and you're no longer that person anymore. So it was basically 12 months of iteration of what am I doing for work, what am I doing at home, what am I doing for exercise, all of these sorts of things, and then just slowly, each 6 months, 12 months, checking in on that for myself personally, professionally, with my wife and our family. And then eventually we sort of found ourselves in the right place where I found Aussie, who I worked for 6 years, and I was like, this is what I want to be doing. And was able to then pursue that with the same vigor and passion that I'd gone after my career with.
Yeah, that's crazy. So touch on those questions again. What was?
Who are you?
Who are you?
What do you want?
What do you want?
Are you in control? And so then you can recalibrate that however you want. So it's like, what do you value? What gets you excited? I've got my personal values, which I'm happy to share. Like I think having like clearly defined personal values is a really valuable tool. And that's only something I've done much later, upon a lot of deep reflection about what gets me going, what gets me out of bed.
What are they?
So my personal values are love your people. Like that's, I'm sure, true for most people, but like having that as at your center helps what could be difficult decisions be much easier. Respect and equity is really important to me as well. So I'm well aware of the privileged position that I've grown up in. Like I had like athletic parents that gave me great genetics. I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. I went to a great high school. I'm a straight white guy. Like that's a pretty good little start to life that I've got, and I've got a lot available to me, but I want to do a lot for others with that. My third one is a sort of counterpoint to the performance environment that I was in when I was doing my sport, and my third one is called joy and mediocrity. I think I've been lucky enough to experience a lot of fun things, be in a lot of exciting rooms, and have a really good time, but the truly fun and meaningful things for me are the simple, quiet things that are available to everyone. I walk my dog every morning. I do the Wordle with my 10-year-old, have a long black, and I couldn't be happier. And now, but also, point number 4 for me is what I've realised has driven me all along in anything I've ever done, and that's taking on a challenge. So I will always, if there's something difficult there, if there's a challenge there, I'll take that on. And so I find that value 3 and value 4 just absolutely mesh together beautifully, because I can, joy mediocrity from 6 a.m. until 7:30, and then take on the challenge until 6:30 at night, and then I come home back into joy and mediocrity, appreciate my time with my kids, reset, recharge. Whether I've been successful during the day or not, it doesn't really matter. As long as I've gone and I've had a crack, and that I can get home and have a clear head to talk to my kids and my partner Katia, then I find that those 4 things work as my kind of cycle, and I can work through and make decisions and get the best out of myself and those around me if I'm true to those.
I love that, mate. That's awesome. When you said the last 2 there, the joy, mediocrity, and enjoying the challenge, taking on the challenge, instantly I was like, the challenge in business, which, all of us are here where, we're trying to grow, we're trying to achieve. I'm assuming we all want to do really well. And so for me, when I heard that, I was like, joy in being average, or joy in the great, and then the challenge that I want to do really good at. but obviously the way you had framed it makes sense, where it's like, hey, I'm here, I'm doing this and taking on this challenge, but things that really matter and what I do get the most joy from is this, and it's not necessarily tying yourself to a
Yeah, the
result or whatever it might
success
be.
of this. Yeah, I'm pushing for that success. I want to do it for maybe different reasons, but it's not going to define who I am. And honestly, if it all goes pear-shaped, the things that are truly valuable will be there for you anyway. So you're about to go on that journey yourself, having your first along the way. You become wise as a parent slowly over time through hard-fought lessons. And I think wiser, still a lot of learning to go, but like there's a lot of things that you know now that, you know, I often reflect on what I wish I'd known as an athlete, what would have made me better, what would have made me a better performer back then. And just having those solid foundations, a good balance, level-headedness, and some perspective, they do all make a large difference.
Love that. I love that now it's my family, a couple of close friends, Steve, and all you guys that know I'm having a baby. So thanks for sharing. No, that's fine. We haven't done the social media post or anything, but it's fine. It's good that you guys know. So yeah, first bubba's due October the 28th. After
hard launched it.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah.
Congrats.
3 years trying an IVF, and we got there, and it's and so on, like, yeah, obviously there's that journey. It's funny you saying that, tying back to identity and where you've been. Every time I look down, there's a photo of you here saying like 2008 Olympic gold medalist.
It follows you around.
Yeah, it's there. It's always there. And so the on this, like I think for a lot of us in the room, actually maybe I'll talk to the parent. Hands up, who's a parent in here that's also like an entrepreneur or like crushing it in biz, or, you know, who we got? Yeah, so so there's a bunch. And so I'm always really curious about like how you, I don't want to use work-life balance. I think it's an overused term. It's like work-life alignment. And how is it here's Steve showing up as the amazing, supportive husband that I'm assuming you are. I'm assuming if I asked your wife, she would say that. But from our combos. And then Steve, who really prides himself on being a great dad and being there for his boys and doing all that awesome stuff. But also Steve, who's trying to like, are we allowed to swear on stage? Yeah, cool. Like Steve, who wants to have a really big fucking impact on some problems that are going unaddressed in this country, and especially like, you know, we touched on it this morning. My wife's a social worker. She's very closely with women and children, a lot that are exposed to horrendous things around domestic violence and whatnot. She worked for child protection for years, in emergency departments of hospitals, and now she works at an all-girls Catholic school down in Geelong, and she like sees some horrendous situations. So you're there with this like noble cause, like, I'm here, that's a massive driver. And I get that feeling of like, I've delivered that purpose and profit coming together. I've delivered a project that's really here I built this because I want to have impact, and it will. And yes, of course, you've got to put food on the table and pay the mortgage and do all of that. And so here's this, and that's like, can be all consuming. And especially with your experience, you've got a shitload of experience. You've got an amazing resume in able to deliver and being able to perform at a really high level. And then it's like, okay, how does Steve then show up for his boys and his wife and be there and switch that gear and not be like, oh, I'm here, but there's all this shit going on over here that I've got to do. Because personally myself, I find it really fucking challenging. Yeah. And so I'm assuming when my son comes on October the 28th, this is something I'll be facing. Yeah. And I'm facing it now with like trying to support my wife. She's got her first trimester, so now she's not dry reaching every 3 minutes. So I'm imagining it's going to be...
All the fun times are ahead.
Yeah.
There's pushing back on the values thing is huge for me. So every decision can push back against those. The next thing is you can only do your best. Like in all of those areas, you can only do your best. And then the part B to you can only do your best is you've got to have standards. So what are the standards you set for yourself? So if you're real about what your best is and you're honest, and that comes from being an athlete. Like I knew if I put in everything on that given day or I didn't. I knew if I put everything into that competition or I didn't. So I had like a real world test of what that is. Like I know what my standards are for myself on all fronts. As a father, at a day at work, in a year at work, as a partner, like so. I have to accept that I can only do my best and I can't do more than that, and trying to push beyond that will be detrimental to every part of my life and everything I touch.
Can I ask, like, how do you know what your best is? And then the reason I ask,
I think sport's easy, right? Because your best is the most that you can do with intent without pushing yourself over an edge. And the beauty of sport is when you push yourself over that edge, you can see like more is not more.
Yeah.
Performance drops off.
Yep.
Right? And so having had that experience, you do know that you reach a point where it drops off. And so I've learnt that through the experience of going too far, of trying to be too much to too many, and having that performance drop off. Because, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to go to that level, but things should be hard but not impossible. Things should feel challenging but not like they're killing you. So we all have those things that you can push up against to see if you are contributing as much as you possibly can. So I think that's you won't know until you go too far in terms of you trying too much. I don't have a lot of experience at the other end of that spectrum. Am I just not trying enough? Do I just not care enough? But I would say that falls into the bucket of, are you passionate about what you're doing or not? Mm-hmm. Because I find most people that I know who are passionate about what they're doing, it's not a question of effort.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're feeling like unmotivated, it's like maybe go check in on your values. Am I passionate about what am I doing? It is aligned to what I'm doing, because then the effort takes care of itself.
Yeah, I like that, man. Thanks. I caught you off guard there with like, what's your best?
Good.
But I think it's like, and the reason I ask, and potentially there's some ADHD. Maybe there's a few of us in the room, and type A personalities, or people that like would just push and push and go and go and go, and I won't eat and do whatever and just like at something. But I think it's always like, in my mind, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I don't know if that was a 10 out of 10. Like, I had my wife ask this when I was talking about this with her months ago, and she's like, Ashley, you did all this, like, it's been amazing, look at all these stuff you achieved. And I was like, Bubs, I don't think I've actually had one day that I thought was a great day, that I actually did what I did. I feel like there's always stuff
left.
That's
standards, right? So you do set yourself a standard, and I think you've also got to be somewhat easy on yourself, because if you constantly feel like that, then there'll be a point where you'll be like, can't do any more, right? So I think it's knowing that I, within myself, am a hard worker. I know that I live up to my own standards and expectations of myself, and I can go a little bit easier on myself, because asking for 5% more every day in perpetuity is not a thing that'll end well in the long run. So I think giving yourself the space to actually say, well, again, the athlete experience, and you're in the recovery game, so you know it as well as anyone, being in the ice bath and sauna game, like having those moments where you stop and recharge, they're the most powerful moments. Like consciously doing things, we measure, like we put so much importance on consciously doing things. I'm putting my focus and energy into doing this. But all of us around here, when do the best answers come to you?
Yeah, it's not when you're sitting there staring at the computer screen.
Nah, no way. It's on riding a bike or on a walk or at 3 a.m. when you're having a sleep, or when you're in a shower, or when you're doing the dishes. Yeah. So like we overestimate like consciously what we can control, but there's this whole big part of our brain that's working on it for us. And so often my best skill I learned from Ozzy, my old boss. He was like, I'm going to worry about that one tomorrow. Like big problem comes up. Like let's like frame up the problem, solve it tomorrow. And then by the time you've woken up in the morning, you're 90% of the way there, and it doesn't seem as dramatic, and you can move on with it.
I love that. Cara, who's our head of operations, has this saying that we love. And she shared it last week. It's the first time I heard it. And it was like, regulate before you operate. And it's like, recenter yourself, and same idea. Like, okay, cool. We know what the problem is. Sweet. Deal with it tomorrow. Yeah. It's like step away.
Yeah, often it's the most productive thing you can do.
Yeah. And it's like knee-jerk reactions, and generally you don't get a great outcome. And it like snowballs a lot of the time.
Yeah, you might make things worse. Yeah,
definitely make things work. So tell us a bit, like, how old are the boys again?
I've got 12, 10 and 6, 3 boys.
Yep, awesome. Tell me a bit, like, as a boy dad, and look at that, like, what's the most awesome part of it, and what's the most challenging, not the worst?
I think the most awesome part of it is just watching them become the people who they're going to be and who they always were. I think I'm a person who believes I can have a lot of influence on what I'm trying to do, and what I've realised is I can have no influence over who these boys are going to be, other than good people, I hope. But personality-wise and interest-wise, they find their own path, and it's just amazing to watch. mean, the whole thing is challenging. Like parenting is constant work and constantly challenging, but like none of it's the worst. Yeah, the challenges are the best. Like that's where you find what you're made of yourself. You're constantly faced with, I don't know, like when your kids get real sick, that's really challenging. When they get upset, it's not easy to deal with. You want to make everything right for them, and then not doing that sometimes is hard to do, but you know the right thing to do. So it is all challenging, but I would say none of it's the worst.
Okay. And part of the reason why I ask this is like you've scaled big teams, right? The previous one of the ventures where you scaled that up to like 200 team members. Now where your team, your direct team, it's not massive, but there is a lot that sits below that with the contractors and everything you work with. There is like hundreds of people working on these projects. Like, how do you see yourself as a leader for them and being able to have impact? Because when I asked about the boys, and you're like, yeah, they're going to be who they are, and you try and set them up, and it's like in your team, I'm sure there's parallels there, where it's like you've obviously got, yes, you've got these values that drive you. You should be able to achieve across different domains, and I'm assuming you're a pretty good leader.
I try my best. So one, set standards and set an example. And the other big one for me, I think, is I think the one thing I learned from my sport, like the jump, I jumped 5 meters 96 in the bird's nest in Beijing in 2008, and I visualized that jump 10,000 times before it happened. And then on the day, it felt and looked and was exactly like it was in my mind. And so I knew that was a thing that you could do. And I didn't know that wasn't a thing that everyone did. And so I think for me to be able to to visualize something out in the future that's big and exciting and bold and maybe different, and then plot out a path to get there, I feel like that's what I can give. And what I've learned over time is that's not the easiest thing to do with a bigger team. Like it is with a small team, particularly a team of one with some support staff around them, really much easier. The bigger the team gets, the bigger the range of personalities and understanding and communication gets, then you just got to find different ways of communicating that vision and that message so that everyone starts kind of heading towards that same endpoint over time, no matter how big or bold or whatever it is. You can't just assume I've said it once or I've shown you the document or whatever and everyone gets it and everyone's on the same journey. That is work.
Yeah.
The bigger the group, the bigger the cohort, the more work that is, but the more rewarding and probably the bigger the prize.
Yeah. Love that, mate. Well, I know we've gone 1 minute over because you've got to make it to the airport and not miss your flight, and you might have to break another world record getting there in time. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, Steve. Appreciate the chat. And
Thank you all for hanging around and having a listen.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.